The Juneau World Affairs Council presents Beyond a War Zone, What's Next for Iraq, with Ambassador Lukman Faily. Faily served as Iraq's ambassador to the United States from 2013 to 2016. He lives in the United Kingdom, where he's active in the Iraqi community and several Iraqi NGOs.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me. Thanks to the World Affairs Council in Juneau for receiving me. It has been a tremendous trip for me, going through Oregon, going to Anchorage, coming here, and then go to California to talk to the American regarding the current status of Iraq, the type of relationship we would like to have with the United States. So appreciate you being here and look forward to your questions. I chose the title of Beyond a War Zone for Iraq, specifically to highlight the key issue that the development of Iraq is not just to do with the security or to do with wars and terrorism. That certainly has been one of the tragic side of the relationship, or the tragic sides of the status of Iraq. But the development of Iraq in relation to communities, democracies, looking for better relationship, being outward looking for a relationship with the United States and other countries away from security is an important one. Unfortunately, when I became an ambassador to Washington, it was clear to me that there is a certain level of Iraq fatigueness in the media, and people association of Iraq as a country where it's all about wars and terrorism. That may have been reinforced with the ISIS and Daesh situation thereafter. But over the last few years, I think we have proven to the world that we want democracy, we want justice, we are seeking as a society to move away from dictatorship. Certainly, terrorism is a global phenomenon. Iraqis have suffered more than anybody else in car suicide bombing and others, where I can assure you, every few years we have a 9/11 or alike. Every year we have the Paris type of bombings, unfortunately. And for us, to move away as a society, as people, young people, majority of the society, so roughly about 65% of the population under the age of 35. 65 of the population. So we are a very young society, population increasing 3% every year. So we are talking about 1 million every year increase. Imagine how many cities and towns and colleges and universities and hospitals you need to provide for that. We are very similar to Alaska in the sense of the oil and dependency, over the dependency, a rentier economy, and we are suffering as a result of that. Oil prices has dropped over the last few years, which meant roughly 40% our revenue dropping. We have 95% of the economy dependent on oil, which employs less than 1% of the workforce. Less than 1% of the workforce gives us 95% of the revenue. So in that sense, I hope this trip of mine will be beneficial for me to learn from you what are taking place. I have tried to talk to officials there in the energy sector, in relation to the fund you have here, and certain commissioners, to learn what we need to take away to move away from the economy, but also to convey the point to our American friends that the treasure and blood, sweat of American soldiers, NGOs, USAID, State Department, and others have not gone to waste. The society is developing tremendously. Democracy is thriving. We will have an election in about 10 days' time. It's the 5th election we have had in a region which is not known for elections, in a region where dictatorship and one person, royal family, or a family ruling ruthlessly has been the nature of it, unfortunately. Even the Arab Spring was somewhat hijacked by certain countries, and certain chaos came to Syria and others as well. Iraqis have tried to get around that by a number of ways. Certainly sticking to democracy, seeking a system which is not as far away from dictatorship as possible, decentralization and others. It has been challenging. Nobody's saying it's easy. We can't say that we are fastly developing to the need of the people, to the aspiration of the people. Maybe because we have not used to have rule ourselves. Maybe because we have used to a decision being made by Saddam Hussein or whomever he delegated. So people were not used to judging and having good governance in relation to their decisions. We have elections in provinces. We have elections every 4 years at Parliament. Women are 25% of the vote by constitution. So to that aspect, it is developing. Is it enough? Certainly not. Can it do better? Maybe, if we have better, clear relationship with our neighbors, with the international community, with the United States. If we feel that the US, for example, is disengaging or is more inward-looking, certainly it will not help us, and hence we cannot work with the United States in relation to purchasing US products, in relation to sending our students here for studying, or purchasing rice, or any other non-military aspect of the relationship. US had a significant role to play in our economy, in our country since 2003, maybe more since the first Gulf War. But since 2003, there are three phases of our relationship. 2003 to 2011, dominated by US presence. At the peak of it, 175,000 troops, which was primarily security relationship, let's call it. 2011 to 2014, a lull in the relationship, no clear direction. Where is it moving? A non-military aspect of it. No US troops there. And therefore, there was what I might call an unpredictable relationship. 2014 summer, specifically after ISIS, Daesh came into Iraq and occupied part of Iraq, to the current, until recently, until the early in this year, it was clear that the cooperation need to be on security. The cooperation need to be on some political cooperation in the region to reduce the ISIS and Daesh and terrorism and sectarianism. But that was the main feature of it. Moving forward, Iraqis expect more, want more, willing to pay more. It's not just an issue of, we're not after US troops being there. We're not just talking about security. We're talking about more normalization of relationship between countries, in which tourism is an important tool for Americans to go over, or for us, our students, to be here more and more, for healthcare, learning about better utilization of technology, and so on. So it's a very, as I said, vibrant, very savvy in a sense of social media. There's more iPhones there than anywhere else, I can assure you of that. So to that aspect of it, we are maturing in one way, we are developing, but not to the aspiration of the people. It's extremely rich society in a sense of not just the history and the depth of it, being cradle of civilization, not just in a sense of having tremendous religious tourism, which not a lot of people talk about that, or the cultural tourism. All the civilizations still have remnants and sites and so on. We also rich in a sense of the geography of where we are, the minerals, the water, the two rivers and so on, fertile land if we want to use it. The raw material for us is there. Do we have the leadership we need to get us there? Not yet. Do we need the help to help us in that, in good governance and so on? Yes. We have a high level of corruption, which is really, really infesting our society from being developed. It's becoming like a cancer. So to do that, we need amount of support in better governance. There are certain pills or bullets we have to bite to move forward. Nobody's denying that. But can we do it alone? Maybe in due time, but we certainly can do it with support from others. And as I said, it's not, we're not after aid society or anything like that. We're not after saying to the US, you need to pay for this. On the contrary, we're more than happy to pay for it, but we need to have a consistent signals coming out of Washington in what they want with the United States. Without it, Unfortunately, I can assure you, U.S. will not benefit, and we will certainly not benefit. Then it becomes an issue of why you were in Iraq, what happened to it. I can assure you that becomes more an issue for the Americans than the Iraqis in that sense. And we don't want that. There is no reason for us to go through that painful chapter and not benefit from it cooperatively. There's no need for us to show the American that every country in our region is all trouble about, or about only after security and so on. It will not benefit you, certainly, I know for a fact. It will not benefit us. So beyond the war zone, that's what we need to focus on. There are certainly a few, let's put it this way, cultural characteristics we need to get better together. It needs to be more predictable relationship. Certainly, what we need to hear from Washington and from others is a hand which says we are willing to work with you in your development. That will be the issues. Otherwise, I can assure you, by the way, let me say this with confidence. I'm not just talking about although I'm in Iraqi and I'm going to talk about the part of Iraq which I know about, but I can assure you this is an issue will be for the United States elsewhere in the region. So to that aspect of it, I think it's beneficial that Iraqis hear this from you. And my job here, voluntarily coming to I'm no longer the ambassador, coming here talking to you as a citizen and me as a citizen as to what we should do together. What are the questions you have in mind, which prevent us from having what I call a predictable relationship. We have not had an easy relationship with the United States, specifically after 2003, for a number of reasons. One, with the American engagement in Iraq. Let me call it, homework was not done properly. An over enthusiastic military operation without clear roadmap for the day after. Not having clarity what the dictatorship of Saddam Hussein has done, damage to our characters, to our society, to our identity. Also having a very, forgive me for using such a word, a simplistic approach in pigeonholing a society. You are a Kurd, you are a Sunni, you are Arab, has not worked. It's certainly a wrong way of looking at us. I'm a Kurd and a Shia. Where do you put me in this three division of the country, which is not cruel, which is really cruel and it's not accurate in any way, shape or form, and does not help anybody. So there are issues which we as a society have not sort of been able to accommodate. The concept of pride, for example, is very high in our society. It goes way beyond normal engagement. So to that aspect of it, it's important for others to take that into consideration. For us, Iraqis have gone through a tremendous challenge in identifying what's a nation and the state. Trying to project democracy without being ready for it has not been a very fruitful exercise. We as a society wants to be democratic, but we have not gone through that in a clear mentor way. The US has tried to help us, but to be honest, it was too much focus, too much money, too much effort put into something without due consideration to time. Society needs to have time to develop. You can't short circuit that. You can't just push a few buttons and say, well, you are democratic now. It doesn't work that way. You need to be democratic from your home, in your in your house, then maybe in your workforce, in your work environment, in your government, certainly. But for us to bear the fruit of democracy, we need much more time than we have had. Higher expectations on others on us. Maybe we as well have been harsh on ourselves, asking too much for it. So to that aspect, it's important that we deal with that. There are certain elements which we have not been able to fix ourselves in moving away from the war zone. And that is, where does the sources of authority lie in our society? Who has the legitimacy for that? Who has the power for changing and reforming the society? These type of questions are being raised by us. Is it do we want it to be a tribal-oriented society? Do you want the state to have the only dominant, or do we want for religion to have a role in our society moving forward? We have a constitution we put forward, a high percentage of the population voted for it, but we are still experimenting with it. We still have no clear definition of certain aspect of it when it talks about wealth. A simple example, which you guys have gone through, which we know. In the Constitution, it talks about that the wealth of oil and energy is for the whole people. So some people are saying we should have some kind of a fund, as you have here. Others are saying, well, we are sort of major infrastructure developments. I talked about 1 million every year. Imagine that. Please bear that number in mind. So I don't know what's the population of Alaska. I'm sure it's less than 1 million. So imagine having an Alaska every year, right? I think you said 30,000 this Juneau, 30,000. So imagine what's that, a week, less than a week? So it's more than that. So imagine having that every year in a region which is not democratic, in a region where it's fueled with a young generation trying to seek, with a high knowledge of social media. So it goes back to that point. So those are the type of challenges we are facing. Certainly, we still haven't resolved the security aspect. Nobody's saying it's fixed or that we've done the harsh part. No. Maintaining security, getting our politics to give us the breathing space away from terrorism, away from the enslavement of people, whatever cruel and sort of criminal acts Daesh has done or ISIS has done to us. We need more time and we need support on that aspect. We need to take ownership of that. No American or any other soldier should be there to pull the trigger. We should do it ourselves, and we should have those fights. And we have. We paid extremely high prices for this fight. Way beyond the imagination of others. Others talked about the country divided, others talked about that it's part of history, Iraq no longer there. No, it's there, because we as a society determined for it. So, moving forward, there are certain, let's call it enablers. We have to work together for us in Iraq with any other neighbor, including the United States. One of them is that when we talk about the strategic relationship, we need to know what does that mean in reality. How could we translate that in energies, in agreements, in trades, in healthcare, in pharmaceutical, and helping us with our judicial system and so on. So we need to address that. There is also another aspect of it, which is to do with a long-term commitment to each other, rather than us watching every tweet and every other signs to see how the relationship is developing. That does not help us. At the same time, we need to have a better understanding of what it takes for us to have a strategic relationship with the United States. We need to get our act together back home. Legislations, communities, how do we approach that? Certainly, the relationship has gone through a roller coaster. And I'm not saying let's bygone be bygone. I would not even dare that. There's too many blood and treasure being spent by Americans and Iraqis jointly in the fight against terrorism. We should learn from that and we should cherish that. But should we enslave ourselves to our history? I don't think so. So I think it's important for us to do that. I will give more time for Q&A, if that's okay. And all I wanted to highlight is the story of Iraq development has not gone away. Iraqis are focused on that. We have extremely high expectation of ourselves because of our history. We may still not know what it takes for us to develop because we're doing it alone in a region which is not well known for its harmony. We are doing it alone because we keep getting mixed signals from the United States. We are doing it alone. And let me say, away from security. I'm not saying whose fault it is. We can work together on that. So to that aspect, moving forward, Iraqis do think and want to have beyond the war zone. They do want to develop, but they need support. And let me thank you here now. So.
I'll go with the first question. Do you find it difficult to travel in the U.S. for any number of reasons?
Not now, no.
Not now, okay.
No, I mean, I travel as a citizen now. There was a brief moment where a travel ban took place against Iraqis, and that thankfully has been resolved now.
Despite being a former Iraqi ambassador to the U.S.?
Yes. Rule of law has applied to all.
So what's the what's the likelihood then now of exchange students from Iraq being able to come over to the U.S.?
We have them, but the whole visa process is not as easy as it was before. And this is for, by the way, this is one of the disablers I was talking about. If we can't get our officials or merchants or students or people who want medical health care and so on, I can assure you there are other options for us. And unfortunately, that does not help us. So the visa aspect of it, improving the relationship on visas and other aspect of it, hence my point about normalization of the relationship. We should not be viewed as a war zone. We are the victims of the terrorism. We're not. So that aspect, I think, we think there has to be some change here. Mindset change more than anything else.
Well, tourism is a big mindset change. Where are the places that somebody should go in Iraq in, say, some number of years?
Well, if it's, we get a good percentage of even American Muslims come for religious tourism, and that's if we get our act in relation to tourism, it will be as much as income as our revenue of oil. We do about 4 and a bit million barrels a day, so it's quite a sizable economy in that sense. Number 2 in OPEC. But culture tourism, let's put it this way, in the south and all over the country, there is a lot, and people do come from other countries.
So the entire country is the attraction? There's no one specific thing then?
No, yeah. It's all about the various civilizations of Iraq. I mean, the Ashurians, Babel, and other places. So it's not known for its. It's known for its richness in histories in every provinces and in all kinds of it. Although ISIS have tried to destroy some in the Mosul, and unfortunately they have succeeded in some. But we have, even since then, while we're trying to fix some of the rubbles of the Mosul, we discovered new sites. So. So even that aspect, unfortunately, that's where we are.
I'm sorry to hug the mic. One more. You have a self-identity as an Iraqi. How far back through history does that go? Because the civilizations that have been there for thousands of years. I mean, at what point is it
Iraq
history?
as a country is in one sense, it's new after post First World War. And here it's slightly different from the United States. In US, the nation and the state built together. For us, the state is new. The nation always been there. Iraqis call them other names, it's secondary, it's just a label. But the actual people living in whether tribal, nomad, or societies, Kurds, Arab, Sunnis, different ethnicities. We have some religious sects or ethnicities who go 5,000–6,000 years back. We have certainly we have a few thousand. I mean, so. To us, one of the new towns is 200 years old, so judge on that.
Okay. We'll open up to more questions.
What is the plan for rebuilding all the cities that have been destroyed by war, Kirkuk and others that have been destroyed? Is there a financial plan? It's going to be a tremendous...
in Mosul, Anbar, certain aspect of Bar, Anbar. There has been some government allocation. We have had positive signals given to us from the Gulf countries. We are yet to see it. We are yet to see the actual dollars and notes. Some signals have been given to us in relation to UN and others. There are funds put together. Is it enough? I can assure you it's not. The rate of destruction. ISIS perfected destruction. They literally booby-trapped houses, homes, schools, and everything else. So there was an issue there. This was not a trench war. This was not a war conducted where armies are cleared. No, it was street fights and so on. So there was an issue, certainly in Mosul, which we're trying to fix. Unfortunately, bodies still being recovered now, months and months after. Civilians as well were hurt by it. So there is a destruction taking place. People are going back in Anbar more than anywhere else. It was one of the most. So people want to go back, but we still have more than 1 million internal displaced people. So we know that. But we still have reliance on the external to help us. I'm saying that because others have promised. There was a conference recently in Kuwait talking about that, a donor conference. It became a loan conference rather than a donor conference, unfortunately. But Iraqis are determined to do that. We need to have clarity of our priorities. Is it rebuilding or stabilization of this, or is it other aspect of it? And how much people are willing to put up with it. So that's another aspect. We have what you might call bombarded with issues to address. Whether it's the oil prices across all this, conducting a war, which is expensive, having the ISIS liberating us with the allied and other countries' support. So we have all these, while we have an increase in our population, while we're trying to cement democracy and so on. So we are, as I said, vibrant, but still have so many challenges. And what you just said, sir, is one of the key challenges we have as well. Urgent challenges as well.
You spoke of unreliable support from the U.S. What about other nations?
Unpredictable.
Unpredictable.
So let's be specific.
What about other nations coming to aid? For example, China or other major economies. What's on the forefront?
Well, you have to bear in mind a few things. First of all, there is a history to that relationship. The U.S. were already in Iraq in 2003. There is expectations of what we have. Our government have only one strategic framework agreement with any other country in the world, which is the United States. This was by our parliament voting for it. So our parliament said we want to have a strategic, and this was signed with the United States. We don't have anything similar to that, which talks about healthcare, judicial cooperation, training, transport, and so on. This is not pure. So that's one sign. Second is the history of the relationship we have is stronger than with China and others. We have a trade relationship with China, and we want to enhance that. Should China give in? I think so. But do we have that? Is our relationship to China similar? No, certainly not. In so many ways, not just politically, security. On the other side, people have to be fair and say, what does the United States want to have as a global role? Do they want to have that role? If they do, then there is a cost associated with that. If they don't want to have that role, then good luck. But there is also cost associated with that. So to us, when I talk about a reliable relationship, I'm not saying it's a US problem. I'm saying we need to align our expectations, both of our expectations. And we need to have a better understanding what is asked of us, what is doable and what is not doable. For us to give a preferential relationship to the United States, which I think we should, there has to be a cost associated with it from the United States. And I think that's the key issue here. It's not, if the relationship is based about oil and who gives energy, you are becoming more energy sufficient yourself. You are not after Iraqi, although you still get a significant amount of Iraqi oil every day in Texas and elsewhere, but that should not be the only the phase or the only dimension of the relationship.
Would you comment on the strength of the Iranian relationship with Iraq?
Well, Iran to us is the largest neighbor, over 1,300 kilometers. Our population are nearer, the majority of our population nearer to the Iranian border. We have affinity to the Iranian side of the border because of Arabs and Shias and Kurds and so on. So we have a symmetry in that sense. I'm talking about ethnically. We certainly have strong culture tie with Iran. It's as much as Mexico and let's say Canada is to the United States. Is it 48 down? What do they call them? Something? Lower 48, lower 48. So it's nice for you to look down on them. So the lower 48. So that's one aspect. There has been not tension, I would say even animosity between the United States and Iran. And I would say both sides have tried to drag us into this. We've tried to keep away from it. Not because we don't want to have a good relationship with both. On the contrary, we do. But we're saying don't make us a third party to this for a number of reasons. A, we have to live with Iran. Two, to be fair to the Iranian, they were the first to support us post-2003, recognize us as a new democratic state when others didn't. Most of our Arab neighbors did not. And while the US was urging Saudi Arabia and other countries to recognize us. That was one problem. Second is when ISIS came in, the Iranians were the first, and they said, and I said this while I was ambassador, I declared, I said they gave us an open check, and that's what they have. They know how to invest, and they know that more or less that's what they say, they know our psychology. And then they know that for us to have a predictable, reliable relationship is important, and they will provide that. There is certainly a cost associated with it. We know nations don't feel generous just for the sake of it. There is a benefit for both parts, and we're not denying that. So to that aspect, yes. Have we tried to keep away from the US-Iranian Cold War? We have. Have we succeeded? Maybe. There is more alignment than in Iraq between the two countries than anywhere else. Yes, my dear.
Two questions. I was wondering about the role of religion in the government, you know, separation of church and state as your country develops, and how fluid that is, or what role how they work together.
Okay.
And the second part of my question has to do with the over-reliance or over-dependence on fossil fuels, on oil, and one, how your country is maybe developing away from the use of those. You need it now for the revenue, and it is a foreseeable source, but I'm wondering about other alternatives and moving in other directions with like the Paris Agreement.
Sure. So we still have, over the last few years, one of the key success stories of Iraq has been to increase its oil production, anything between 300, 400,000 every year. So we have increased significantly over the last few years. While we had the war, while we had everything else, we were determined to increase our revenue. So to that aspect of it, that's a good story. And we have become one of the most stabilizing factor in the global oil prices because of our role. So we have been the good guys on that aspect. We are number 2 in OPEC now. And we would like to increase that aspect of it. But at the same time, you are absolutely right, we need the diversity. We have identified that for a number of reasons. We should not have a workforce which is not productive and getting subsidized by the government in any methods of labels rather than them being productive. We are certainly supposed to have a liberal market economy. So we are not into the ex-Soviet Union socialist system where everybody is employee of the state, although we still have high percentage. We are at this moment one of the highest percentages of the world in relation to employees who are employed by the state. So it's the main breadwinner, unfortunately. So we are trying to diversify in one way. We have not yet had the infrastructure for it. So banking need to accommodate that. We need to change our systems. We need also to change the culture of people start saving money rather than just being a cash economy. Another aspect of it is manufacturing. Agriculture has improved significantly than before, than 2003. Our revenues, just to put things in perspective, from 2003 to now, the income has increased by tenfold. So GDP per capita has significantly, and hence when I talked about everybody has an iPhone. So in that sense, one of the very few good news is which people don't know about. It's not an issue of revenue, but it's an issue of how much of your revenue cycles in your economy before it gets out. That's the challenge we have. If manufacturing is not there, if you only provide as a service industry, that's an issue. If agriculture is not there, then you have an issue. So that's one of the key challenges we have to address. And that is revenue, taxation. At this moment, most of everything is free. Taxes is not that high anyway. So customs need to be enforced, which we haven't yet enforced. Corruption is one of the, I call it the deep state of Iraq. It's corruption. So these various syndicates working in various sectors and trying to bleed the society and bleed, it's a challenge for us. It's not easy. There are so many reasons behind it. Some of them are deeper, to do with Saddam systems, to do with sanctions, to do with culture of war, to do with warlords being raised as a result of that, terrorism. There are so many reasons behind it. Not having what you might call an effective government, because we don't have opposition parties. Everybody wants to have a share in the government. So this consensus government has not been very effective for us. So there are issues of that nature. Sorry, your first question was? Religion. Okay, role of religion. Thank you for this question. I did say that our constitutions, we try to interpret it. The Constitution talks about importance of Islam, that it should not contradict it. The society itself is not what I might call theologically only. It's not we're not into an Islamic state of Iraq. Nobody is after that. Even the Islamic parties are not calling for it, because they know the diversity. They also know that the diversity of ethnicity and of sectarian, sects as well. They know the diversity of nationalities as well. So it's one of those aspects. However, we have tried to say, okay, the president needs to be a Kurd, the Speaker of the Parliament needs to be a Sunni Arab, the Prime Minister needs to be a Sunni Shi'i, or sorry, a Shia Arab or some Shia. So there is that aspect. That's one thing we have tried to diversify. We have had challenges with diversity because of, for example, ISIS. A lot of minorities have left. When society goes through the challenges we have had, unfortunately, minorities have left Iraq because of that. It's not a theological problem of separation of state and the church. That's there in the Constitution. It's a culture of interpreting it. It's embracing that. It's having clarity that the role of the clergy should be limited. Say we have elections now, which we have. We need to have clarity that we do not highlight the issues of religion as one of the main reasons why it should be elected. Shouldn't be. But that's one aspect which we need to address. So we need to have the right culture to become a symbol or to become the guidance, the beacon for us to move forward with it. So theoretically, we have more or less got it fixed, not to the extent I want, but do we have the right culture to enrich the separation? Not yet. Please don't link us to other countries where they have issues with women drivers and anything like that. We have none of that problem. So we have none of that aspect of it. And actually, we had 70, 80 years ago, we had even ambassadors, women ambassadors. So we never had those problems before. Yes, dear.
Hi, what is the health of the Euphrates River? I'm not sure I pronounce it right.
You are an archaeological doctor? I think we have challenges. During the last 30, 40 years, Iraq has not been able to build enough dams to address the challenges. While Turkey, Syria, primarily Turkey, have, which both rivers sources are from there, have been able to have massive dams. That's one aspect. Second is deforestation. Back until 50s, early 60s, Iraq was the basket of the region in relation to provision of food. But because of industrialization, because of the oil sector, curse here, not blessing, because of the oil sector and so on, we became more deforestation. Conduction of war by Saddam Hussein's Iraq-Iran war was one of the main, let me give you an example. 5,000 villages, primarily Kurds, across the border between Iraq and Iran were flattened. 5,000 villages, because he did not want to have sympathizers or he wanted to have security control. So these villages are all about, farmers and everything else. These villages are farms. So we have issues of deforestation, which we haven't addressed. So in addition to that, what also has not been addressed, and that is our method of utilizing water in farming, in domestic-wise. We're still very generous with usage of water. We shouldn't be. We have challenges, specifically down south in relation to Euphrates River. The south you go, the more become problematic. Up to Basra, where historically the clean water, fresh water needs to go to the Gulf countries. Now in the countries reversing. Salty water from the Gulf is coming up. So we have issues of that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Could you speak to the status of women in Iraq today and their ability to obtain an education and work outside the home, and also why there is such a high birth rate?
The birth rate, it's not just in Iraq. In the region overall, you could see it clearly in the Arab Spring. It becomes a culture point. Governments have not worked on socially engineering the society accordingly. No incentives has been given to have less children. So in that aspect of it, when you don't have good education, job opportunities provided, there are things of that nature. So that's aspect of it. And the government have not, because to be honest, I think it's some level of taboo involved in it. It's culturally not acceptable to say I don't have children or I have few children. The government has not focused on it, and I and very, very few other people openly talk about this issue. And we're saying this is dangerous. We cannot sustain our economy, let alone any other things, let alone getting a healthy society to focus on education while we have this high increase. So to that aspect of it, it's not a winnable war at this moment. I'm not having it, but we're raising it. That's what we can do at this moment. And your first question was in relation to women and women. According to the Constitution, there is clearly talks about equal gender and that sort of thing. Society was, until the issue of Sunni Shi'i, until the issue of Islamic versus non-Islamic became fashionable in our region, which is, I'm talking about 80s, 90s onward. We never had the issues of women in the normal sense, which comes to Western audience mind, like working in work and farms and offices and so on. We never had that. Now, because of sectarianism and other isms, the role of women has gone backward in our region. I would say so, yes, I agree with you there. I don't think it's an Iraqi problem. I think it's more to do with a regional, maybe even I would say in our regional problem. I'm not going to say global problem, but it's a regional problem. The governments have tried to get around it with American help, I might add, even in early, by having percentages allocated to women, 25% in parliaments and so on. That helped, but it's not to the extent we want to. There has been women in ministers and so on, but not to the extent I want as well. And these are part of the social problems we need to address. Yes, sir.
What does the common Iraqi do for pleasure?
Soccer is still an important aspect of it. We are also focused on, I would say, some kind of picnics and social gathering. It's still important. Certain level of sports, not a lot. Talking about politics. Seriously, I call it a consumer of politics. So the elections, for example, is becoming very hot topics. Way too much, way too unhealthy, that aspect of it as well. We do need to have other topics which talks about the developments and debates. Certainly, utilization on social media is extremely important for us. Still a consumer society. Still, so we need to enhance more entrepreneurship in our culture, so that ideas becomes more important. There is another point which I think is relevant here. Our education, you have to bear in mind when I talk about social engineering, Saddam Hussein socially engineered the society, dictatorship socially engineered the society so that they cannot think by themselves. So a key cultural challenge we have to get around, and that's the teamwork. Our curriculum does not cover it a great deal, so we need to accommodate for that as well. Any more questions? Let me thank you all for your time, and I wish you all the best, and I'm sure I'm enjoying myself, and I'll enjoy tomorrow before I travel again. Thank you again, all.
That was Ambassador Lukman Faily in this Juneau World Affairs Council presentation, produced in collaboration with 360 North. It was recorded April 30th, 2018 at 360 in Juneau, with major support from the Prospector Hotel and additional support from AEL&P, Kerr Alaska Kensington Mine, Haight & Associates, Sea Alaska, the University of Alaska Southeast, and Wastman & Associates.